The International AIDS Society today expresses its profound sadness at receiving news that colleagues and friends en route to attend the 20th International AIDS Conference taking place here in Melbourne, Australia, were on board the Malaysian Airlines MH17 flight that has crashed over Ukraine today. This incredibly sad and sensitive time, the IAS stands with our international family and sends condolences to the loved ones of those who have been lost in this tragedy. The IAS is hearing unconfirmed reports that some of our friends and colleagues were on board the flight, and if that is the case, this is truly a sad day. The IAS has also heard reports that among the passengers was a former IAS president, Dr. Joop Lange, and if that is the case, then the HIV/AIDS movement has truly lost a giant. Thank you for your attention.
Was supposed to be a meeting of some of the greatest medical minds in the world fighting HIV, turned into a place to eulogize fallen colleagues. As more and more information came out on Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 apparently shot down over Ukraine, the International AIDS Society revealed more than 100 researchers on their way to a conference in Melbourne, Australia, were on board. The conference was set to begin this weekend. Much of the early coverage of the deaths focused on Dutch researcher Joop Lange, a former International AIDS Society president. Several media outlets continue to say up to or as many as 100 people on MH17 were en route to the HIV/AIDS conference in Melbourne, but reporters in Australia speaking with conference officials put the total at 108. Barre Sanusi told reporters it was too early to estimate the impact of such a large loss to the HIV research community, but others didn't hold back their assessment. The federal president of the Australian Medical Association told Time the amount of knowledge that these people who died on the plane were carrying with them and the experiences they had developed will have a devastating impact on HIV research. The amount of time it takes to get to a stage where you can come up with those ideas cannot be replaced in a short amount of time.
This is an article entitled The Cancer Industry's Big Lie. And it starts off with a comic, and I just want to point out the comic because it's absolutely based on fact. What will never happen? A breakthrough, sir. I've just discovered the cure for cancer. Brilliant. Let's skip the patent process and give it to the whole world for free. That's what Big Pharma would say. In a perfect world, yeah, that is what we would love to happen, but the reality is more like this. What really happens? A breakthrough, sir. I've just discovered the cure for cancer. You're fired. It would devastate our repeat business. Because Big Pharma is in fact a business. It's not an organization or a system that truly cares about the health, vitality, and wellness of the everyday people. At the end of the day, all they care about is their stocks and the money that they get from all this death and disease. So it's a real sad thing, and it's time that we start waking up to it. Now,
you're telling me that these people that dumped this AIDS-tainted blood in foreign countries, who killed children, have not been taken to task in the United States?
It's worse than that. The U.S. government allowed it to happen. The FDA allowed this to happen. And now the government is completely looking the other way. Thousands of innocent hemophiliacs have died from the AIDS virus.
You say you have internal documents that show that they knew that this drug they were dumping was tainted with the AIDS drug? Or the AIDS virus?
The documents show that there was no question that this company absolutely understood the risk, that they knew that it was contaminated. It wasn't a possibility. They knew it was contaminated. Americans were dying from the product before it was pulled off the market. The only reason it was pulled off the market is because lawyers found the documents and showed it to the government, and finally the government said, you can't sell it here, but then the government allowed them to dump it in Spain, France, and Japan.
That's amazing. That's just amazing.
Well,
I want to read to you what the New York Times said, and this is an investigation that they also did, and they said the federal government was part of the problem while the Food and Drug Administration told the company not to ship the drugs overseas. The man responsible for the drug supply, quote, asked that the issue be quietly solved without alerting the Congress, the medical community, and the public. This is a cover-up, and our Congress is not doing anything. What should Americans do?
In the 1970s, President Jimmy Carter commissioned the Global 2000 report. The findings of the report blamed virtually all of the world problems on the population growth of non-white people. The report went on as far as recommending the elimination of at least 2 billion people in third world nations off the face of the earth by the year 2000 in order to restore Western supremacy. Interestingly enough, also in the 70s, the AIDS epidemic broke out, claiming huge amounts of life in third world nations, as well as amongst the growing black and Hispanic population of America. It was said that the virus originated from green monkeys in Africa and was later passed on to the local population through either acts of bestiality or through consuming them as food. From there on, AIDS spread like wildfire across the African continent and later on to the rest of the world, claiming millions of lives. However, the story was just a smokescreen. On June 2nd, 1988, the Los Angeles Times published an article refuting the idea that the human AIDS virus originated from green monkeys. It uncovered evidence that the DNA composition of AIDS was totally inconsistent with that of green monkeys. In fact, it could be proven that the AIDS virus could not be found anywhere in nature and could only have ever survived in the human biological system. If the virus did not exist anywhere in nature, the question is raised as to where exactly the virus all of a sudden stemmed from. On July the 4th, 1984, the New Delhi newspaper in India called The Patriot published an article making the first detailed charges of AIDS as being a counter-biological warfare agent. An anonymous American anthropologist was quoted, claiming that AIDS was genetically engineered at the U.S. Army's Biological Warfare Laboratory at Fort Detrick near Frederick, Maryland. Then on October the 30th, 1985, the Soviet journal Literaturia Gazeta repeated the charges made by the Indian newspaper, making it an international controversy. All this, however, was easily passed off as a communist rhetoric by the Masonic West. However, on October the 26th, 1986, the Sunday Express became the first Western newspaper to run a front-page story confirming the findings of the Indian and Soviet newspapers entitled AIDS Made in Lab Shock. The outbreak of AIDS has been linked to vaccine programs around the world. The internationally respected London Times newspaper published an article at the front-page story on May the 11th, 1987 entitled Smallpox Vaccine Triggered AIDS. The article establishes a direct correlation between the smallpox vaccine administered by the World Health Organization to an estimated 50 to 70 million people in different Central African countries and the subsequent outbreaks of AIDS in those regions. The World Health Organization is the medical wing of the United Nations. The evidence suggests that AIDS is a genetically engineered virus spread through vaccination programs in third world countries, germ warfare against the innocent and the weak, aimed at eliminating an entire populace off the face of the earth. AIDS is nothing other than the modern-day final solution, and all of this for the purpose of installing an economic policy that would give complete global domination to the Masonic West. However, for the Freemasons' economic domination on its own is not enough. In order to have Masonic governments at the head of global union, under complete Masonic control, an economic union may suffice, but to keep it there, they would need a military union, and that union would be none other than the UN.